What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today we're going to be talking all about the optic attachments in Call of Duty Vanguard. I'm going to be doing a full-on side-by-side comparison with every one of the optics in the game so you guys can make the decision for yourself as to which optic suits you. Just keep in mind throughout this comparison, I'm not going to be looking at reticles. This is just going to be the base optics with the base reticle on them. And let's start it off with the low zoom optics. These are the 1.35 times optics. It'll give you the exact same zoom value or magnification as you would get using iron sights. And it turns out there are 5 of these, even though there's 7 stated in the menus, but we'll get into that in a little bit. The other 2 aren't quite exactly the same magnification. But first up, we have the NIDAR Model 47. This is typically your first unlock when it comes to optics in this game. Then we've got the Slate Reflector, which is a super popular choice. This is the one that I always gravitate toward if I've got it unlocked. I think I just really like the simple reticle. It's just a dot, it doesn't really obstruct your target at all, and I like that. After that one, we have the Monocular Reflector, and with this one, it does have more of a ring around it, which could potentially obstruct your vision outside of the exact center of your screen. However, you'll see a nice clear view of the enemy character model, and it doesn't obstruct that model at all, which may be beneficial for some people. Then we've got the Mark III Reflector, which I really like this optic. I'm just not a fan of that base reticle. I feel like it obstructs the target a little too much, and I really wish with this optic we just had a clean dot on it, but unfortunately, at this point at least, we don't have access to that. And then finally for these, we have the Mark VIII Reflector, which again, I really like the optic itself. I just hate the reticle on this because it completely obstructs your vision. So looking at the overall comparison of these low zoom optics, I actually like most of them. I think the Mark VIII is the only one that I would absolutely steer far away from. However, if I had to pick, I think I'm still going toward the Slate Reflector. I just love the fact that you have a nice clean dot there, and this is why that's my go-to optic, at least for my more aggressive class setups, which is most of them. Now down the road, if we get access to better reticles for like the Mark III Reflector, then I could definitely see myself transitioning toward that, but until then, the Slate Reflector is the way to go. So those are the low zoom 1.35 times optics. However, there are 2 more optics in the menus which state that they have a 1.35 times magnification. However, when you actually compare these to the previous 1.35 times optics, these ones clearly zoom in more than 1.35 times. Now, it's also less than 1.5, so I don't know exactly where they're at, but I did separate these into their own category. And with the first one, that ZC2 optic, I really don't like this. The body of the optic is just way too thick and obstructive, and you've got a lot of tunnel vision with this. However, with the Saturn 1.35 times, I actually really like this. The ring is a lot smaller, and therefore it's not going to be obstructing your target all that much, and it's got a nice clean reticle on it, and therefore this is an excellent choice as well for a lower zoom optic. But moving on and zooming in just a little bit more, we've got our 1.5 times optics. And with this one, we've got the Mark III sun filter, we've got the Mod 2 sun filter, and then finally we have the Mark 18 sun filter. And with all of these, they have the exact same default reticle. And this one is going to be quite subjective. You do get a very large viewing window with the Mark 18, but with the Mark III, you don't have as much of a ring around the edge of the optic, and therefore it's less obstructive in other areas. And then the Mod 2 is kind of just in the middle. Either way, I do think all of these optics are solid choices if you want a bit more zoom than the previous ones we've looked at. And now let's start zooming in even more, but keep in mind, from here on out, we're going to start to see downsides on the optic. Everything I've mentioned up until now, there's no downsides whatsoever, but going forward, every single optic we're looking at now is going to have a downside. One of the biggest notable downsides we're going to be seeing is a reduction to our aim down sight speed. And the next available zoom option is going to be our 2.5 times zoom, which there is only one optic that I could find at least with a 2.5 times zoom. And with this, you can see it's a nice clear optic, great reticle on there as well, not a super thick ring. And you might notice there's some actual stat changes on this. First up, that downside being a reduction to our aim down sight speed, but we've got some positives here too. This actually improves our recoil control a little bit, and it improves our accuracy, which is our aim down sight spread or bloom. So this just makes it more likely that when you pull the trigger, the bullet is actually going to hit where you're aiming it. I think this particular optic is quite underrated, and once we get the Vanguard weapons integrated into Warzone, assuming we don't see any massive changes to the optics, I think this is going to be one of the more popular options out there. But moving on to our next zoom level, we've got a 3.5 times rifle scope. And with this, you can see it's definitely zooming in more. It's got quite a clean reticle here as well, although it is a bit more obstructive than the previous optic. And this one has the same upsides and same downsides, so it is going to help you with your accuracy and your recoil control, but it will be hurting your aim down sight speed a bit. Next, we're going to move into the hybrid optics, which have multiple zoom levels. And the first one we've got here is the M38 Slate 2.5 times. This one very noticeably improves your recoil control and accuracy. And we've got a 1.35 or 2.5 times magnification on this, depending on which optic you want, and you can toggle between the two. After that, we have the 1229/Slate 3.25 times custom. And right now we're looking at the 3.25 times optic on it, and then we can toggle that over to a Slate optic, which is just like our Slate reflector from earlier in the video. Then we have the M19 4 times flip, and this is the 4 times zoom, which isn't a very good optic in my opinion. It's super obstructive and a very small viewing window. However, you can toggle that over to a 1.5 times zoom, but when you do that, it flips the initial optic to the side and blocks even more of your screen, so I would recommend staying away from this optic. Next up, we have the SVT-40 scope, which isn't just available on the SVT-40. This can be used on a wide variety of weapons, and this one has a 3 to 6 times magnification on it. And while it does have a pretty small viewing window, at least it's not overly obstructive. And finally, for our hybrid optics, we've got the 1913 variable 4 to 8 times magnification. And this one does give you quite a bit of zoom. However, it has an extra downside compared to the previous ones. Not only is it going to hurt your aim down sight time more than the previous optics we've seen, this one will also have visible optic glint, so enemies can see a very bright glint as long as you're aiming in the general direction of them, regardless of whether or not you're in the 4 times zoom or the 8 times zoom. There will always be a glint present while aiming down sight. So that's it for the hybrids. Personally, I tend to stay away from the hybrid optics. I think there's just too much going on. I like to keep things nice and simple. Now let's get into some of the high zoom optics that we can use. And the first one is the Type 97 5 times telescopic scope. And with this one, you can see it's got a fairly small viewing window, a very large ring around that, so it's quite obstructive. And this one also hurts your aim walking steadiness and your aiming stability on top of your aim down sight speed. And while in the menus it states this one will give you optic glint that's visible to enemies, in my testing, that's not actually true. You're not going to be giving off a glint with this optic, at least in the game's current state. They may fix this in the future. After that one, we have the Type 99 7 times scope. And with this, we're seeing more of an improvement to our accuracy and our recoil control. However, it is going to be hurting our aim down sight time a bit more than some of the previous optics. And with this one, we also do have visible glint, which I tested to confirm, and yes, this one will give off glint. And finally, for our high zoom optics, we have the K98 10 times scope. And again, this one gives you +2 recoil control and accuracy, so it's going to be helping quite a bit in those areas. We also have a crazy zoom value. You can see just how much it zooms in. However, it is going to be hurting our aim down sight time a decent amount, and again, there is visible optic glint when aiming down sight toward an enemy. So that's it for all of the primary optics in the game. However, there's one special one that I just decided to save till last here. This is the Mark 12 night vision scope. And with this one, this is what your enemies are going to look like when you aim down sight at them. It doesn't make them glow like night vision scopes that we've seen in the past with many other games. Instead, it does help a little bit with your low light visibility, and also something that might help with this is the fact that it just simplifies the textures, so it might make it a little easier to pick out a target if they're in an area where there's a lot of textures going on. On top of this, this optic will be working through smoke grenades in this game. It is the only optic that will work effectively through that, and you can see here, it just straight up ignores the smoke grenade, so the player will look exactly the same with or without that smoke in between you, which can be excellent if you happen to run into one of those teams that love spamming those smoke grenades. It's also worth noting this will help with your accuracy and your recoil control, and it's got a 3 times magnification on it. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on all of the optics that covering all of the optics that we have in Call of Duty Vanguard. Personally for me, I generally just stick to those lower zoom optics. My two personal favorites would be the Slate reflector as well as the Saturn 1.35 times optic. And I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on that 2.5 times optic once the Vanguard weapons are added into Warzone. But of course, I'd like to hear from you guys in the comment section below. What are your favorite optics to use in Call of Duty Vanguard so far? Also, if you guys enjoyed this video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.